When we think of silent comedies, we think black and white, exaggerated body language, slapstick gags, and pie fights. And in my opinion, no one embodied all that better than Roscoe Fatty Arbuckle. If Chaplin gave us comedy with tenderness, and Keaton wowed us with death-defying stunts, Arbuckle gave us something else. Pure, unfiltered comedy. But how did Arbuckle craft humor still holding up 100 years later? Let's break down how a master of silent comedies made hilarious movies. Now, to understand Arbuckle's style of comedy, we must first understand how his career developed. You see, before he was a screen legend, Arbuckle was a successful stage performer. He toured both the US and parts of the world. In the early days of cinema, back when movies often resemble plays, this would prove a tremendous advantage. Arbuckle had years of experience seeing live what makes and doesn't make an audience laugh. But the touring life was tough. So between tours, Arbuckle tried something new. Movies. Now, this may be hard to believe today, but back then, this was seen as a step down. In the mind of the public, film was an art. Not yet, at least. It was new, disreputable, and didn't pay well. Sounds a lot like YouTube. Back then, serious actors were on the stage, not on the screen. How times have changed. But Arbuckle found something in it. It was easier than life on the road and a whole lot more fun. He could mess around with his friends every day without spending days traveling and get both laughs and money for it. Pretty good deal if you want my opinion. Now, he got his start in the early 1910s with the legendary producer Mack Sennett, the king of early comedy. Again, a wonderful opportunity. Not just to make a name for himself on the screen, but also to learn the ropes of filmmaking, which he did. By 1916, Arbuckle was finally directing his own films, with total creative freedom, something many directors dream of. That's when his style of comedy, mixing both his backgrounds, really came into focus. Now, while Arbuckle was the headliner, his best films were in reality the work of a trio. Roscoe himself, of course, his nephew, Al St. John, and a young newcomer he brought into the movies, his soon-to-be best friend, Buster Keaton. Each one had a distinct role and, more importantly, a distinct presence. Arbuckle was the protagonist, round-faced, cheerful, and surprisingly nimble. St. John was the troublemaker, skinny, twitchy, with a nervous energy and exaggerated expressions. Keaton was the wild card, usually stone-faced, sometimes a rival, sometimes an ally, often just an unlucky bystander swept into the mess. Their differences weren't just funny, they were clear. Arbuckle once said that he didn't mind letting others steal a scene, and it shows.
An actor doesn't lose anything by effacing himself once in a while. If he is a favorite, the audience is all the more certain to welcome him when he gets back in the picture.
Arbuckle's comedy thrives on contrast, big versus small, calm versus frantic, innocent versus scheming. That's what makes the gags work, not just what's happening, but who it's happening to. Even without dialogue, you always knew who was who and what their role was in the scene. It's visual storytelling at its simplest and smartest. Now, Arbuckle knew exactly who he was making films for, as Buster Keaton puts it.
I went into pictures with Roscoe Arbuckle. I mean, his pictures, the first ones I appeared in. And I'd only been with him a short time, and he says, here's something you want to bear in mind, that the average mind of the motion picture audience is 12 years old. It's a 12-year-old mind. Sure entertaining.
As a result, his films follow a clear, efficient formula. Simple plots, broad readable characters, visual gags that build fast, and a villain who always gets what's coming. If this sounds familiar, well, that's pretty normal. His work was a direct influence on early cartoons. As a matter of fact, many of the creators behind the Looney Tunes grew up when Arbuckle was at his peak. It's very likely that their style of comedy was heavily influenced by his. You can see it all: gags that defy physics, sanitized playful violence, characters dressing up and cross-dressing, even characters literally seeing stars. Arbuckle also had a habit of breaking the fourth wall, another staple of cartoons. But crucially, only his character breaks it. The others always stay in the world of the story as to not break the illusion. A simple glance at the camera is all that it takes to create a sense of complicity. We're not just watching the joke anymore, we're in on it. And just like cartoons, Arbuckle's comedy runs on rhythm. Set up, disrupt, escalate. Let's look at a good example of that with the 1917 film Coney Island. Arbuckle starts by introducing the characters. Here, Roscoe, Buster, and Al are all competing for the attention of a girl, played by Alice Mann. Buster is broke, Al has money, and Roscoe has swagger. Then he introduces the setting, in this case, an amusement park. In this sequence, he introduces 3 different spots, each corresponding to a character. St. John is buying ice cream for the girl because he has money. Keaton is trying to show off his strength because he doesn't have money. And Roscoe flirts with her while the other 2 are busy. You can see how characters and settings interact with one another. Eventually, all 3 stories collide with a series of gags. The audience can follow because the layout is clear. We know where everyone is, we know what their deal is, and as a result, the payoff feels earned. Arbuckle does the same thing in almost all of his films. In The Cook, for example, we're again shown the layout of a restaurant at the same time as we discover the characters. Roscoe, the cool chef, Keaton, the flirty waiter, and St. John, the unruly customer. And when the chaos starts, we never get lost. That's not just luck, that's planning and precision. There's a clear structure behind the chaos. And what's amazing is that this structure still works today. Comedies like Airplane, the Cornetto Trilogy, The Hangover, and many others, they all follow a similar formula. Introduce the characters, set up the space, escalate the gags. Silent comedy, or even comedy in general, is not about old-timey pratfalls or pie fights. It's about structure, timing, and contrast. And speaking of pie fights, another trick Arbuckle mastered was playing with expectations. Sometimes someone throws a pie and it hits the wrong person. Classic slapstick misdirection. But if you do that every time, the audience starts to expect it. So sometimes the pie lands exactly where it's meant to. It's not just funny, it's satisfying. It gets a laugh and a cheer. That's what Arbuckle wanted, not just gags, but a complete audience experience, which is clearly something he took from his years as a stage performer. In conclusion, Roscoe Arbuckle knew how to craft a laugh, not by chance, with care, with rhythm, with contrast and clarity. Because a well-structured joke, a gag that escalates just right, a character who lets you in on the chaos with just a look, well, these things never get old.